Alright, welcome everybody to the Streets of New Capenna set overview episode of Limited Level Ups. I'm Alex, as always here, live on Twitch. This is our episode where we look at the set, kind of a abridged set review, for those who maybe don't have the time or patience for a 6-hour-long set review. We're a week out from the set review with me and Ethan that we did on his stream. Posted that to the Limited Level Ups podcast feed. I'm sure a lot of you saw that, but in a week's time, a lot can change, opinions can change, and more importantly, I have actually had some time to play with the set. The New Capenna early access for the streamers was yesterday, so I've got like 8 hours here under my belt. So we're going to be able to collaborate my experiences with the experiences that I've read from other people, and I'm going to try to bring to you the best pre-release information and guide I can before playing tomorrow. We're recording today on Wednesday. So buckle in, we're going to be going over some big picture thoughts in the format, some archetypes, and some top commons, and anything else in there sprinkled in that I can, give you any little knowledge nuggets that I have. All right, so before we jump in, of course, I do want to shout out the Patreon, patreon.com/limitedlevelups. That is the #1 place you can go to support the show, support the podcast, support the stream, support any of my content. If you like any of the content here at Limited Level Ups, that is the absolute best place you can go to support me. There's a bunch of reward tiers over there. There's access to the Discord. There's coaching tiers. There's deck log and deck tech reviews. A lot of great options over there. There's also access to the weekly quarter classes that I hold on Saturdays. You can, I post those on YouTube, but if you want to be a part of those, you can go over to the Patreon, check out those tiers. That's all. Not going to take too long in this, but I just also want to say thank you so much for all the support that everybody provides on Patreon. Really, really helps the show keep going, helps us keep the lights on, as it were. And yeah, can't say thank you enough. Let's just jump in. So first off, big picture thoughts on the format. So in any multicolor format, there is always the question of how often are you going to be 3 colors versus how often are you going to be 2 colors? How often are you going to be 4 to 5 colors? Where should you be picking multicolor cards? Should you first pick 3-color cards? Should you first pick, monocolor cards to be more flexible? And the answer is never clear cut. All right, and I think in this format, in Streets of New Capenna, the answer is not clear-cut. There's going to be a wide variety, a spectrum of decks that you're going to be drafting and decks that you're going to be seeing. So these range from 2-color aggro decks, and yesterday in the early access event, I actually tried to have a mono-red deck. Didn't quite get there, had to unfortunately play some black cards, but it was very close to a mono-red deck. So these 2-color aggro decks are going to exist. There's also going to be 3-color decks, of course. I think that I hesitate to say that will be the default because I don't necessarily know that. But from a design perspective, that you would assume that would be the default. And when I say 3-color decks, I do want to be clear, and I've made this point before, but I really want to hammer it home because as I was streaming yesterday, this was a question that did come up a lot. People were asking, when you say 3-color decks, do you mean truly 3-color decks, like 33% red cards, 33% green cards, 33% white cards? I don't mean that, and I think most people don't mean that. It's often 2 colors as a base, green-red, for example, splashing some white cards, or splashing some, 3-color cards. You're like green-white, and then you have a green-white-red card in there. The mana base is going to be tough to put together, where you're able to play all 3 colors of an equal split. The mana base, even in these sets with a lot of fixing, with a lot of lands, just doesn't work out that well, because you still want to be able to cast your 2s on 2 and your 3s on 3, right? If you've got white 2s and green 2s and red 2s, well, that's kind of a recipe for you not being able to cast your spells still. So when I say 3-color decks, there's going to be some that are more 3 colors than others, some that are closer to 2 colors in a splash, some that are, splashing, 5, 6, 7 cards that are, the 3rd color. But keep in mind, it's kind of just a offshoot of 2-color decks, honestly. And then, getting further down the spectrum, there are 5 and 4-color piles that are going to exist. These are the kind of decks where you pick fixing extremely highly. Maybe you even do the thing where you take lands all of pack 1 or fixers all of pack 1, and then packs 2 and pack 3 you take all the powerful cards you see. This is where you get into the true, oh man, everything I was just talking about with your mana base, making sure your mana base works in your 3-color decks. I don't want to say that goes out the window, but the conceit here is you have so much fixing that you don't exactly care too much about the order you draw it in. Like, you're going to have enough 5-color or 3-color fixers of multiple colors that you'll kind of just hope to cast your spells, and the the reward for this is you get to play all the powerful cards, like the most powerful cards. The 2-color decks and the 3-color decks, they have to, be kind of pigeonholed into playing slightly less powerful cards, but their mana is a bit better. So that's the big trade-off, honestly. The difference between a 3-color deck and a 2-color deck is going to be consistency versus power, right? It's always that push and pull. And in a 3-color set, there are the tools to be as wild as you want. That doesn't mean you should always be wild, though, right? I think, as we're going to get into that, we're going to be talking about these 2-color aggro decks a little more, and I think it's honestly unclear what is the strategically most correct lane to try to follow, 2 colors or multiple colors. Like, I think there's room for both, and that's what I think is going to, it makes a great format when there is room for streamlined decks and kind of piley decks. But just keep in mind that as you're drafting, pick one, pack one. Don't go in thinking this set, you have to be 3 colors. You can be fewer colors or more colors than that. So, if you are going to be 3 or 4 colors, something I want to hammer home, again, take the lands highly. So we've got this cycle of 2-color dual lands, ally color dual lands that sacrifice to draw a card. Those are good. There's these 3-color Evolving Wild variants that go and get a land of the family's colors. Maestro's Theater, for example, it ETBs, and you sacrifice it. When you do, you get an island, swamp, or mountain, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle, gain a life. And of course, there's the best ones. There's the rare lands. They add one of any of the colors of the family you have. So for example, Spar's headquarters here is a Forest Plains Island. It adds green, white, or blue, and they cycle for 3. These are the best because cycling on a land is awesome. And of course, being able to get not just, the last lands I talked about, the ones that sacrifice and go get basic land. You have to kind of pick and choose the moment you play it. These ones, you always have access to all the colors. So that's a pretty big benefit. I think this is a point that most people know, right? Most people have internalized. If you've taken in any of this preset content, if you've watched any of streamers stream or draft this set so far in the early access release event, or if you've just drafted a multicolor set before, this is probably something ingrained. But for those who have not done any of those things, or maybe it's not as ingrained, I really, really want to hammer this home. There is some thoughts or some people I was seeing in Discord, on Twitter, kind of saying, well, I've never drafted a multicolor set before. Are you really going to be taking lands 3rd, 4th pick? Yes, the answer is yes. Now, it might turn out, and like I was saying, I'm not sure exactly where this is going to fall, but it might turn out that 2-color decks are just better than 3-color decks in this format. And I think from me playing yesterday, my experience has been there's already an inkling in my gut that says that might be true. If that is true, lands will be a lower priority. You still want to have some of them, right? Say you're in a 2-color deck, you still want to have some of these dual lands. Good mana is still good mana. But if we're often not in 3-color spaces or 4, 5-color spaces, then yeah, you're not going to be first picking them, third picking them. They're going to be lower priorities. I assume that will not be the norm, though, right? I assume even if it is best to be a 2-color deck, it's not always going to be easy to get a 2-color deck, right? Because there's still good 3-color cards out there. It's just harder to get high enough card quality in 2 colors in these sets, because there are so many gold cards, that you will often need to branch out into a 3rd color or a 4th color. So if that is the world we live in, then yes, take these lands. Honestly, these rare lands, the ones that add color of any of the 3 and cycle, I'm happy to first pick these a lot of the time out of kind of a weakish pack, right? These dual lands, the Skybridge Towers, the ones that sacrifice to draw a card, or the Maestro's Theater, the Evolving Wilds variants. 2nd, 3rd, 4th pick these lands. You're going to have to, and you're going to want to. You're going to probably want, like, let's say you're a 3-color deck with 2 base colors and maybe 5 off-color cards, or kind of, 5 of your splash color, quote-unquote. You're going to want 5 or 6 lands in your deck, right? 5 or 6 dual lands to be able to cast those. And that's a minimum, I think. If you're not there, you're just going to have mana problems. And even in the pre-release, or the pre-release one for the if anybody saw that, the loading ready run pre-release, but also the streamer event, I saw a lot of people, have kind of sketchy mana bases where they kind of were doing the 6/6/6 mana base, just like, well, I've got a dual land in there, and you're just not going to be able to cast your spells on time. All right, so another big question that I kind of had, and something I've seen posed, is how good are the family fixers? And by family fixers, I mean this cycle of common 3-color cards that are large creatures. They cost, for example, we have Glamorous Outlaw here, 3 blue, red, black, so 3 in, the family colors, and they're big bodies, but also have this ability to exile from your hand a land you control gains the ability to tap for one of any color of the mana that of the family. So there's Glamorous Outlaw being the Maestros one, or Grixis, as a lot of people might know. You can pay 2, exile it from the hand. You can make the land tap for blue, red, and black. So blue, red, or black. Sorry, specifically. My experience with these yesterday was that they were pretty good. Now, when I say they're pretty good, I mostly mean they do an okay job of fixing you if you need that role filled, and then their bodies were all also pretty good. All just like passable, maybe is a good way to put it. I was always happy when I cast them. They are large, is one thing I can say about them. The creatures in this format are small. They're all 2/2s and 3/2s and 3/3s, and so something like this Glamorous Outlaw, which is a 6 mana 4/5, Mass Bandits 6 mana 5/5, Rakish Revelers 5 mana 5/3 comes with a 1/1. They do dominate the board you're on the curve. Maybe a little bit later in the game, not so much. You're gonna be able to trade with them, but they did come down and stabilize you to some degree, where it's like, yeah, like I can't just attack through this all the time. That's notable, right? I think it is notable to say, hey, these creatures have the benefit of fixing me, but are also just good creatures on their front side. Where these stand in the rankings of fixing for me are passable, right? I don't think you're going to be taking these where I was just advocating you take them the lands, where you take the lands. But I think if you took them, in the middle of the pack, you'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with that. I don't feel too bad about that. I think you really want your fixers to be on your lands just so you can, it's just cleaner that way, right? You don't have to pay mana. Like, you do, it's a cost to have to pay mana for your land to fix you, right? Like, I don't want to downplay the fact that paying 2 is still a cost. Now, there are a lack of awesome 2-drops in this format, so taking turn 2 off to fix your mana might not always feel too bad, especially in some slower matchups. But there are going to be matchups where your opponent plays a 2/2, you are like, oh, I was planning to fix my mana on 2, and they start beating you down with a 3 or 2 power creature, and you're like, oh, that's kind of a problem. So I don't want to downplay the cost of these, right? But in the set review with Ethan, I was talking these down a little bit. Ethan was too, and I was watching some streamers stream yesterday. Kenji was kind of down on them as well. Numut the Nummy. Even at the beginning of my stream, I was kind of down on them. But as I played with them, and as I saw more people play them on the other side of the battlefield, I was like, all right, like these aren't actually that bad. Something that is of note as well is that they do splash themselves, right? So in your blue-white deck, you could play Shattered Seraph, right, which is the blue-white-black one. Like, you don't have to put any black sources in your deck. I don't think you want to do that. I think that's probably a good distinction to make, right? That even though you could do that, you could splash them off themselves, I don't think you want to do that, because I don't think the payoff for casting these cards is all that great. I should also say, I think the best ones are the Grixis ones, the Naya one, and the Bant one, right? Glamorous Outlaw, Rakish Reveler, and Spar Adjudicator. I'll read them, actually. Glamorous Outlaw is the one that's a 4/5, 6 mana, comes in, deals 2, scries 2. Rakish Revelers is 5 mana, 5/3, comes in and gives you a 1/1 token. Spar's Adjudicators is a 5 mana 4/4, it comes in, locks down something for a turn. That thing can't attack or block until the next turn. So these are the better ones. I think the more expensive ones, Shattered Seraph, which is the 7 mana 4/4 flyer that gains 3, and Mass Bandits, 6 mana 5/5 Vigilance Menace. I think those are not as good on the body side, but those other ones, especially the Spar's Adjudicator, I really like that one, are actually, fairly fine. So here is an interesting question. How do you stay flexible in the draft? This is another big thing that's come up. Do you take a good 3-color card early? Do you take monocolor cards to stay open? Should you just take lands all the time, like I was saying before? Just like take lands early and often. I think it really depends on what you want to do. I think it really is user's choice, where it's like, well, I could go in and take a 3-color card and really go, okay, well, if this pans out, great. If it doesn't, it's not a huge deal. I'll probably be able to, like, if it's not open, say you take a black, red, blue card, pick one, pack one, it's not open. Well, that probably means the other colors were open enough that you're like, okay, I'm fine abandoning this. I move into, red, green, white, or something like that. That's fine. But you can also look at it from the perspective of, well, if I just take flexible monocolor cards early, then I can be flexible and move into my 3-color pair later. I think you could do it that way as well. You could also do that strategy like I was saying, just take a bunch of lands early and figure it out later. I don't know what the actual right answer is to this, honestly. The thing I want to point out here, though, is I think multiple strategies are viable. You could do any of them. And I think if you are more predisposed to playing multicolor good stuff, yeah, sure, take the 3-color cards early. If you're more predisposed to drafting a 2-color aggro deck, you probably want to just take a monocolor card first pick and then keep taking those monocolor cards and then maybe figure it out after. One thing I will say is it is definitely a benefit to take a monocolor card when you can. Something like Nightclubber, which is one of the mythic uncommons of the set. Truly, really great. If you have not seen this card in action, this is the 1 black, 3-mana 2/2. When it ETBs, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until it turns. It has Blitz for 3 mana. Card is awesome. Very happy to first pick this card over a 3-color card, because honestly, this is going to be better than a lot of the 3-color cards. Something as well like Inspiring Overseer, the 3-mana 2/1 flyer that ETBs, draws a life, gains a card. Another thing, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to take this early instead of a 3-color card or even a 2-color card because it is flexible. Where do you draw the line between, well, there's this 3-color card that's pretty powerful, but there's this monocolor card that's maybe not as powerful but more flexible? I'm not exactly sure. And I think that as we draft a little more, it's going to become more obvious. It's also going to be very much case by case. I know this is a question that's come up a lot and something that people want to know, like, where exactly is that line? And unfortunately, I can't give you a great answer. I think it's going to be something you have to, you're going to be able to figure it out a little bit better as the set goes on and figure out where the power levels lie. But it's going to be something you're going to have to make a judgment call on. And it's going to be one of the more interesting things, honestly, as the set goes on, just kind of figuring that out. So I know this is something that people have been asking for. Alex, how do you make this distinction? But it's one of those classic Magic, it depends. I'm so sorry. So moving on to the removal here. The removal's just okay. The removal is fine-ish in this. So actually, I would even just go as far as to say it's kind of clunky for the most part. The common removal. Like, we've got Deal Gone Bad. This is 4-mana instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. Target player mills 3. This is solid. Gets through shield counters, but nothing exciting. Prize Fight, 2-mana fight spell, instant, Mythic Treasure. Okay. Hold for Ransom, kind of a medium pacifism effect, 2 mana. Chance a creature can't attack or block. The controller of that creature can pay 7 to have you sacrifice the pacifism. They draw a card. Ready to Rumble, 5 mana, deal 5 in red. Kind of like, definitely doesn't line up favorably compared to the removal spells we've seen as of late. Now, I do want to say, this is most of the common removal spells. There are some really, really good standouts. Murder is, of course, in this set. 1 black, 3 mana, destroy target creature. Strangle, single red mana, sorcery, deal 3 to a creature. These two cards, especially, these are the standouts for me. Like, these are a tier above those last cards I was talking about. 2 tiers above even. Maybe even 3, if I'm being generous. Like, these are efficient, instant speed in the case of Murder. I will still say, though, like I was saying a few times before in preset release content, I do feel like there's enough stuff in this format that punishes removal, where it's like, I don't want a ton of it still. It's just like we've seen in the past few sets, I'd say the full past year of set, maybe aside from Crimson Vow, where it's like, yeah, there's a bunch of value creatures running around, so you want some removal, but you don't want to load up on it, right? So it's just like you want like 4, 5, 6 removal spells max. Take the Murders, take the Strangles. Those are going to be good. The Prize Fights, the Deals Gone Bad, the Hold for Ransom. You can take those if you don't have removal, but I wouldn't be looking... Like, these aren't early picks. I don't think those other cards I was talking about are early picks at all. I will also say, though, a card that impressed me during the early access event was Run Out of Town. So this is 3 and a black... 3 and a blue for an instant. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it at the top or the bottom of their library. They choose, by the way. You target it, they get to choose. So this is kind of a... Revenge of the Drowned, a group tide for older players, but doesn't make a token compared to Revenge of the Drowned, which made that card busted. This card is not busted, but it felt closer to the Murder/Strangle tier removal than it did the Deal Gone Bad, Prize Fight, Hold for Ransom, Ready to Rumble style removal. Like, being instant speed was a pretty big deal, especially in blue. Being able to just, get rid of cards with shield counters, get rid of anything that's kind of like, has a death trigger. There's no leave the battlefield triggers in this set like there were in Kamigawa. This is just, purely death trigger, so you can kind of delay a death trigger. I think maybe in the middle between the Strangle Murder tier and that other tier I was talking about, but definitely a card I wanted to point out. And then, of course, there is the great removal spells. There is a bunch of really, really good removal spells. I don't know if you want to count Nightclubber, that creature I was talking about, the 2/2, comes in and gives something, or gives everything your opponents control -1/-1, a removal spell, but that one's great if you want to count that. Out of the Way, 4 mana, instant, return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. You draw a card. Sleep with the Fishes is one I've been impressed with. 2 blue for an aura, enchantment-based removal spell. Comes in, taps the creature, it doesn't untap. You create a 1/1 blue fish token that can't be blocked. Grizzly Sigil is one I really like. Single mana for a sorcery, single black mana. Casualty 1. It's kind of weird wording, but what it comes down to is it deals a damage and you gain a life to any creature. Or if you sacrifice a creature, it deals 1 + 3. It's kind of, I'll actually read out the text because it probably makes more sense. But, so it says, choose target creature or planeswalker. If it was dealt non-combat damage this turn, this Grizzly Sigil deals 3 damage to it, and you gain 3 life. Otherwise, the Sigil deals 1 damage. The joke here, of course, is if you casualty it, you do 1, and then you do 3 on the second copy, so really you deal 4. The life gain on this is really nice. The fact that you can go 1/1, kill 2 1/2 creatures has been really nice. I've been a pretty big fan of this one, especially in your like Maestro sacrificey decks. Yeah. Also, chat's pointing out here that this seems to, you might think this would work with against shield counters. It doesn't, because it deals 1. That 1 was prevented, and then the creature won't be marked as this has been dealt damage, so you only deal 1 again. So be careful with that too. The theme amongst these great removal spells, right, the Grizzly Sigils, the Out of the Way, Sleep with the Fish, Nightclubber, of course, is something I've been saying a lot about removal spells in the past little while. You really want your removal spells to generate some sort of additional bonus or resource if you can. Like, that separates a good removal spell from a great one. Like, efficiency is one thing, instant speed is one thing, but generating value, whether that be in the form of life gain, or drawing a card, or making a fish, or leaving behind a 2/2 body, like, that is truly what makes an awesome removal spell. And I think that's obvious to a lot of players, but I just wanted to spell it out a little bit. Okay, so one last thing here, big picture. I want to talk about the 2-drop slot. The 2-drop slot in this format is hard to fill with good creatures. So we've got this cycle of gold commons: Body Dropper, Civil Servant, Snoozing Noopy. I'm going to call that the entire format, I'm sure. Snooping Newsy. Jetmir's Fixer. These are going to be priorities. I think that these gold commons are actually going to be pretty big draws into these 2-color pairs, right? That, black, red, white, green, these allied 2-color pairs. There's just not a ton of good 2-drops in this format. Now, there's a few, and we're going to get to them. But I think by design, they put the power at the higher mana cost, right? They didn't want you to have a bunch of awesome 1s and 2s in this format because they wanted players to have a little bit of time to set up, make sure, they can cast their mana fixing spells, play some tap lands. They don't want you to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, kill you. Now, that exists, actually. I think there are decks that can do that, and, worth noting, there is some exploitation to be had if that is, you're so predisposed to be doing that. But I think for the vast majority of decks you're going to be facing, they're not going to be playing awesome 2s, so you do have a little bit of time. So that being said, when there's not a lot of 2s, the good ones are good. You really want to prioritize them. You really want to prioritize these gold cards. Past those gold cards, just a few want to point out here. Corrupt Court Official. This is one I definitely want to highlight here. So this is the 2-mana 1/1, ETBs, target opponent discards a card. Virus Beetle, if you will. Virus Beetle 2.0. Virus Beetle had a lot of awesome synergies in its format. Ninjas, artifact synergies. Corrupted Court Official has just as many, and I think it's just as good as Virus Beetle. So there's obviously the Maestro sacrifice stuff, right? You can go Corrupted Court Official, sacrifice to my casualty cards. That's a nice little combo. I think there's a few other things, especially with the card Fake Your Own Death, which is a 2-mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+0, and you make a treasure, and when it dies, it comes back. So a nice little synergy there. Treasure synergy overlap as well. That also just plays well in general with the Maestro's casualty sacrifice stuff. I've been super, super impressed with this card. It's not like a on-curve attack you kind of card, but in your slower decks, I think this is the best 2-drop you can possibly have. And then another 2-drop I want to point out here, Mayhem Patrol. This one, I was on my radar as a good card, but after playing with it yesterday, I would not be surprised if this is in the tier of Inspiring Overseer, Jewel Thief, like these awesome commons, like just the tippity top commons. This is 1 red for a 1/2 menace creature. When it attacks, target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So it attacks as a 2/2 menace. Blitz, 1 red. And for those who don't know Blitz, I'll read it out. You can cast this spell for its Blitz cost. It gains haste And it also gains whenever this creature dies, you draw a card, you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. This plays out so much better than you might expect. Like, not that I think it looks like a bad card, but even like wherever you think it would perform, it performs better than that. It just pushes so much damage. Blitz in general, and we're going to get to this, is fantastic. It's just like the big standout mechanic for me, as this is probably the best mechanic, the best family mechanic in my mind. Also just works well with any sacrifice thing. Also just like all these blitz creatures, they're just like these cantripping lava spikes, like cantripping deal you 3 damage, deal you 2 damage at their very worst. You could also on turn 2, if you're missing land drops, just cycle this. Like this is something I didn't notice till yesterday. You just go, oh, cycle my Mayhem Patrol. I need to hit my 3rd land. I deal you 2, and then I draw a card, and I probably hit my 3rd land, right? It's like, that's a small bonus, but it's all these small bonuses that add up to just, like, a fantastic card. I can't sing the praise of this card high enough. Like, I move this card up to, like, I don't know, like a B, honestly. I think that's how good this card is. It's about that level. Raffine's Informant, another pretty good 2. 1 and a white for a 2/1. ETB's Connives, just solid card. Crooked Custodian I have here, not quite on the same level as other cards I was talking about. This is 1 and a black for a 3/2. ETB's tapped. I just want to speak to this card as a card that I was impressed with in my red-black aggro deck I had. Just like 3/2 hits pretty hard. If you have a bunch of cheap interaction spells, you can force this through. Plays pretty well with Sticky Fingers, which is the menace granting aura that makes treasures. So it's like, yeah, I mean, this isn't a awesome card, but I did want to point it out is if the 2-drops are bad, then even the bad 2-drops get a little bit of a bump up. And this one is one that impressed me more than I thought it would. All right, moving on to archetypes and themes. So this set, usually when I do the set overview, I do kind of a deep dive on each archetype, kind of going over mechanics. And I'm going to do that a little bit here today, but not as in depth as I usually would. Because the archetypes and the themes are a little bit loose, and there's a lot of crossover, and I don't think I would be doing justice to the decks or to the archetypes by saying, if your shield counters matters, or if your brokers, you want to do this, and if your treasure matters, you want to do, like, I don't think it works like that, because there's like, for example, I think when your brokers, your blue, white, green, or Bants, for people who know that nomenclature, I can't really tell you what your deck's going to do. I think you could be base green-white citizens, you're like go-wide citizens with some blue cards, or you could be base blue-white flying counters matters with some green cards, right? I don't think, like, I think maybe even the more helpful thing to do is talk about 2-color pairs, and then what the 3rd color adds onto them, because I think, honestly, the family mechanics, Alliance, Connive, Casualty, Blitz, there's not all that many cards in the set with these mechanics on them. And they don't actually provide a ton of mechanical identity to the decks. Like, for example, if I said, what does your Alliance deck want? Well, creatures, obviously, to trigger Alliance, right? But I don't really think it's like, my Alliance deck lives and dies by having Alliance cards and ways to trigger it has, right? Same with like Connive. I don't think you're going to be building around Connive that often. I think it's really more going to be about like what your cards are asking of you, whether you're more of an aggressive deck or a controlling deck. Maybe you do have some more pointed synergies, like you're really heavy sacrifice or really heavy treasures matters. That could be true. I'm more going to talk about just overall thoughts and feelings about these and just what my experience so far has been. Less, I think these decks want this. Like, obviously when the set comes out and 17 lands comes out, we're going to have more information about that kind of stuff. I don't think it's all that helpful today. So I'm going to do some more broad strokes. Also, I want to shout out this graphic. I know for people who are watching, you can't see this, but user Salamander on Reddit put together this really nice graphic, really smooth, kind of talking about the overlap between the families and the 2-color pairs. So the way that they've set up this set is that there's the 3-color families, right? And connecting the 3-color families is a 2-color pair. So for example, shield counters in the brokers and Alliance and Cabaretti, the crossover there, color-wise, is green-white, right? There's green-white, both families share green-white. And in that green-white color pair, the theme there is Citizen Tribal, right? And so you can kind of think of the set like that. Honestly, like I was saying, if you think about the set more, about what are the 2-color pairs doing, counters matters, for blue-white, or 5 cards in the graveyard for blue-black, which is kind of a rough theme too. It's kind of even like one of the smaller themes. Sacrifice matters for red-black, and like what green cards gives to the red-black cards, or what blue cards in casualty gives to the red-black cards. I think that actually helps you frame it a little bit better. Why this matters is because in the draft, you're going to be looking to be, like I was mentioning before, probably 2 color pairs before you're into 3 colors, right? You're going to be starting in green-white, or in blue-white, or in blue-black, and then finding your 3rd color, rather than going, slam my 3-color rare, pick one, pack one, I'm 3 colors, I'm these 3 colors, and I'm going to draft these 3 colors. It's much smoother to start in a monocolor, just start monocolor, or take a, green, white, gold card, and then figure it out later. Also, it's not great to start with, let's say you take a black card, pick one, pack one. You don't really want to take a white card the next pack, because then you're in the space of, okay, well, I'm in an enemy color pair, like I'm in black-white, and the only deck I can be in at that point, in playing all the cards I've taken, are, a connive deck, an obscura deck, right? Blue, white, black. I actually don't think it matters all that much, to be honest, like, in the sense of, like, how much you're going to get punished if you take a white card and then a black card, right? It's not like you need to play both those, and I think you still can play both those. Just for the sake of flexibility, though, I do want to point out that you are incentivized to be in the allied colors and starting in 2 colors rather than 3, and starting in allied rather than enemies. So just some thoughts there. Okay, going into the mechanics. I want to start with the Riveteers and their mechanic Blitz. So the number one takeaway I had from yesterday's early access is that Blitz is great. Like, Blitz is awesome. Anything with Blitz, just like that Mayhem Patrol 2-drop I was talking about, plays out so much better than you might think. All day, I was blitzing my cards and going, oh, and I draw a card? So they got hit with a 4/4, and I make a 2/2 off this Girder Goons, and I also draw a card when this dies. Oh, that's great. It's just like a lot of immediate impact, and then you get your card back. So I guess the concept here is that all of your cards kind of turn into these cantripping burn spells, right? Where you're like, blitz out my Plasma Jockey, blitz out my Girder Goons. Plasma Jockey, by the way, 4 mana 3/1. When it attacks, target creature an opponent controls can't block. Blitz for 3. Girder Goons, 5 mana 4/4. Blitz for 4. And when it dies, you make a tapped 2/2 rogue token. I was just going like, play a 2, play a 3, and then the rest of the game, blitz, 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 blitz. Really, really powerful. I was super impressed, and honestly, it felt like I was playing a different game than my opponent. Now, I was playing a straight red-black deck. That's another kind of, reason I was playing a different game than the opponent. I had just, like, a really good curve, and I was playing 2 colors rather than my, compared to my opponents who were playing 3 and 4 and 5 colors, I was really able to overrun them. But not only are these cards inherently powerful, but they've got synergy, too. They've got sacrifice synergy, right? You can trigger all your sacrifice matters cards. There's that card I was talking about, Fake Your Own Death, the 1 in a black, something gets +2, and then when it dies, comes back, and you make a treasure. Really, really good with blitz cards. Imagine you go Girder Goons on turn 6, blitz it out, cast Fake Your Own Death. So they're taking 4, because often your opponent doesn't want to trade, or they're chumping, which is also good. And then your Girder Goons dies, and then it comes back, you get a 2/2, and then you have this 4/4 in play that dies into a 2/2 the next turn potentially. So you're taking 6, right? Sorry, chat corrects me. You're taking 6 because Fake Your Own Death gives +2. And then on top of that all, you've made a treasure from Fake Your Own Death, and you draw a card off the Girder Goons dying. Like, that's just so much. So it almost like reading these cards, you would feel, you want to blitz these things out at the last, top deck your blitz card, blitz it out, go for that last few points of damage. I think if you just have a density of blitz cards, you're going to go, like what I was saying, you go 2, 3, blitz, 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 blitz. Because it almost feels like you're playing like 2-for-1s, or almost 3-for-1s in the case of Girder Goons, for each turn, right? Because the card's worth of value you get back from, the thing dying and maybe a sacrifice trigger happening, or Girder Goons making a 2/2, added up with the fact that, you dealing damage to the opponent is worth a card in your deck a lot of the time because you're an aggro deck. Plus, of course, the raw card you actually just draw all adds up to just a really good package. So everything with Blitz, just bump it up. Just bump it up how good you think it is. I will say, I see this more of a red-black focused mechanic rather than a green mechanic. Like, Riveteers, of course, is red, black, and green, right? The green doesn't add that much, though. The green, there's the green common, what's it called? I don't remember what it's called, but it's a 5-mana common that you can blitz for 4. It's a 2/3, and you put 2 1/1 counters on something when it dies. That card I found to be okay. Green doesn't add all that much to this strategy in general. I've just done this, and this is where I was talking about before, where it's like, you kind of have to have a reason to have that third color, I think, in your deck, especially if you are starting down a focus 2-colored path. Because if you don't, and you're just like, oh, I know this is a 3-color set, I want 3 colors of cards in my deck, you can kind of inadvertently be hurting your deck. Because adding colors to your deck is a cost, right? And if you have the mana to cast your 3-color cards, that means you have a bunch of tap lands in your deck. And if you have a bunch of tap lands in your deck, that's not great for your aggro deck. So there is trade-offs, of course. You know, you're going to have some really powerful gold cards. I'm not saying in these decks you're never going to play green cards. My feeling so far has just been I have not felt good reasons at common, right, for me to put green cards in my deck. Okay, so just to get a little bit deeper into black red here. So there's Body Dropper, which I think is an awesome 2-drop. This is the red-black 2/2. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, you put a counter on Body Dropper, and you can pay red-black to sacrifice a creature, and the Body Dropper gains menace. So this is the ideal 2-drop to be playing, right? Just play this, play a 3, go blitz, 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 blitz. This thing just gets massive. This thing just keeps growing. If you can, on turn 4, go blitz something, turn 5, blitz something. And it's a really, really powerful 2-drop. And it's that, like I was saying, without a lot of good 2-drops. There's also Pyre Sledge Arsonist, which is a pretty good uncommon here. 2 in a red for a 2/2. Tap, pay 1. The Arsonist deals a damage to any target where X the amount of permanents you sacrifice this turn. Combos with the Body Dropper, combos with Blitz, combos with Treasure. Really nice. I think this is the 2-color pair that I'm looking early on to get into in the format. I think this is, at least from my early experiences, I had this awesome deck yesterday. This was an easy 7-0, where is exactly what I was describing a second ago. Bunch of good 2s, especially the Mayhem Patrols. I have 3 Mayhem Patrols. I do have that Crooked Custodian, the 3/2 comes in tapped. Sticky Fingers, 2 copies of that. Goldhound. I had 4 Witty Roast Masters, which is one that I was pretty impressed with, especially in multiples. This is 2 in a red for a 3/2. Alliance, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, the Roastmaster deals a damage to each opponent. So once you're cycling through a bunch of creatures, you go blitz, 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 you draw into more creatures. This thing can deal like 5 damage, honestly, a lot of the time. So yeah, this is, and as you can see, for people who are watching along, no green cards, right? It's just a straight 2-color deck. So Plasma Jockey is another one that I should actually talk up a little bit. This is the 4-mana 3/1 that when it attacks, something can't block. I think this is a card that if you have not played with Goblin Heel Cutter before, which is a card from Fate Reforged, this card might look a little bit junky, but this thing just deals a bunch of damage out of nowhere, especially if you blitz it out. So yeah, just, again, I've kind of said my part on this deck. I just think this is, I was playing a different game. It really felt like I was playing a different game compared to what my opponents were doing. The second deck I want to talk about here is Maestros. So this is the red, blue, black family. So this is kind of similar, kind of adjacent to the sacrifice stuff we were talking about. Their mechanic is Casualty, of course. It's on spells. You sacrifice creatures to copy the spell. This is another deck I was really impressed with. So this is much more on the grindy, play a long game kind of spectrum of aggro versus control. I was playing, like, I was decking myself pretty frequently with this deck I had. It was like a, you know, strong, you know, it was like mostly blue-black with some red cards. It had Cormella, which is the 2/4 uncommon, 1 blue, black, red. Haste, tap, pay a mana. You can add blue, red, black to your mana pool. You cast this, you can only cast instant sorceries with this mana. When she dies, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Really good with the casualty cards, because you can cast some more expensive casualty cards with this, but also when you sacrifice Carmella, she gets you some spells back. Really, really good with Dig Up the Body, which is a 3-mana instant casualty 1. You mill 2 cards and you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Combos with Carmella because you can get back the thing you sacrificed with this. So you can go get back Carmella, get back something else. You can kind of do some loop-de-loops. Again, I'm going to bring it up again. the Fake Your Own Death. This card is coming out once again. Combos with Cormella, right? And also the treasure you make matters for sacrifice matters things and fixing your mana as well. This is kind of just like you're gonna play your lackeys, your expendable lackeys, your corrupt court officials, just these like small creatures that block or provide value in some way, and then you sacrifice. Like, you often want to be casualtying your cards is really what it comes down to. You want to be copying your cards. And when you can start your game with an expendable lackey, the 1 mana blue 1/1, you exile it from your grave, you get a 1/1 unblockable, or turn 2 court official, you really start the train going. And it's just like, I just felt like I was grinding on a level that my like Bant opponents or my, I don't know, things that didn't have a bunch of casualty, graveyard matter stuff opponents that were trying to grind weren't. Like a big green deck, right? I just felt like I was grinding on such a level that was so much bigger than what they were doing. Just going way over the top. I was in one of those situations where I was just like, I have so many things I could do with my mana. I don't know what to do. Right? I had like 7 options, and I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what the best thing to do here is, because I had so many good value grindy options. And I feel like when I was playing, I started the day off yesterday playing a bunch of green decks. I just felt like, well, it's pretty obvious what I'm going to be doing this turn and what I'm going to be doing next turn, and my turns are kind of scripted a little bit. And it was like, okay, well, I'm doing some good, decent value things, but then I played the Maestro's deck, and I was like, wow, I'm just doing things on a completely different level. So I'm a big fan of this. All of the casualty cards are pretty good. Grizzly Sigil, like I mentioned. Rooftop Nuisance, 2 and a blue, sorcery casualty. Tap target creature, it doesn't untap during its control's next untap step. You draw a card. Really big swing, right? You sacrifice your court official, or your 1/1. Tap. Those 2 things don't untap. Get in a big swing of attacks. You can't attack me back. I draw 2 cards. It's a little bit worse than I actually thought it might have been, to be honest. I thought this card was going to be awesome. It's more just like solid and good. Not to talk it down too much, but it's just one of the, I just want to point it out as one of the good casualty cards. I found that the red casualty cards weren't as good. So there's like the 2 mana deal 2, which I think is fine, but just less good than the blue and black cards, is what I would say. If you're going to group, just bucket them all. The blue and black casualty cards, a little bit better than the red ones. And then blue-black has this theme. This cards 5 different mana values in the grave theme, which is incidental, but came up so easily. Like, I was just enabling it trivially in my deck that I had. And that's mostly because I had a bunch of self-mill. I had the Snooping Newsy, 2 mana 2/2, blue-black, comes in, mills 2, and then when you have 5 or more mana values in the grave, it gets +1/+1 lifelink. And I had the Dig Up the Body, which mills some cards. I had just like a bunch of incidental stuff, right? And of course, you can sacrifice your cards to get different mana values in your grave. You can discard your cards some ways. So while this is a theme that you're not going to be going all in, right? You're not like, oh, I'm blue-black, 5 different mana values in the grave. All the cards that have this text on it, look at them as, I'll probably have these at some point, right? It's not going to be I might have it, I might not. It's kind of just like eventually these cards will come down and realize their full potential. Syndicate Infiltrator, another pretty decent one. 2 black, blue, 3/3 flyer, gets +2/+2 when you have 5 mana values of cards in the grave. Rogue's Gallery is one I want to point out. 2 and a black for a sorcery. For each color, return up to 1 target creature from your grave of each color. So, you can return a black creature, a blue creature, and then if you have Cormella in your grave, right, the red, black, blue, uncommon, she counts as a red creature, so you can just get back, gold cards play really well with this card. Really easy to draw 3 off of these. It's not that hard to draw 4 off if you just like are splashing, in your Maestro's deck, you're splashing a random green card. I think I haven't had a Maestro's deck with a random good green card in it. So yeah, I think this is just a really awesome card advantage engine. These decks are not short on ways to get value, which is something I should point out. So you really want to prioritize cheap interaction and cheap ways to get on board early. You're going to be going over the top of pretty much any other deck, right? So really do prioritize the Newsies. Actually, Newsy is the one that I should point out, the 2 mana lifelinker. This card impressed me more than I expected to, just because, again, you get there pretty quickly to the +1/+1 lifelink, and the lifelink was really big. I had a lot of games where it was the mid game, maybe my opponent got me down to 8 or 9 and had like the potential to close out with a flyer. Then I just played a Snooping Newsy, and they like they had to really struggle to kill this thing, right? Because if they didn't, there's like, okay, they're going to gain 6 life, or I'm going to gain 6 life, and they can never come back from that, right? So I think this is when I was looking at the set previously before playing, I was like, okay, filler 2-drop. I think this is better than a filler 2-drop. I think this is a card you actively want in your deck. All right, next up, we've got Obscura with their Connive mechanic. And this one is, it was underwhelming, to be honest. I found that, so Connive is just good, right? It's not a bad mechanic. You cast your Connive cards, for example, Rafine's Informant, 1 and a white, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you Connive, which means you draw a card, discard a card. If you discard a non-land, nothing happens. If you discard if you discard a non-land, you get a counter on that creature. If you discard a land, nothing happens. Totally fine. Anything with Connive, you're like, yeah, that's good. Like, Rafine's Informant, good card. Psychic Pickpocket, 5 mana, 3/2. ETBs, bounces something and you Connive, good card. But I never felt like when I was facing an Obscura deck, I was like, oh, they're really going off. Or their engine, like, there's no engines really, like there were, like I was talking about with the Maestros cards. Like, I felt like my deck was very, it was just this monster when I was playing playing Maestros. When I was playing Obscura, I was like, yeah, these cards kind of stand alone and they're fine, but they're not greater than the sum of their parts for the most part. Like, there's a few cards, right, where, like Fairy Vandal, which is the 1 in a blue 2/1 flyer, that whenever you draw your second card each turn gets a counter. Like, that's a pretty good card, but it's not really an engine-y card. There's also Quasar, which is the 1 blue, black, white, 3/4. That when you draw a card, they lose a life, you gain a life. Like, that's a perfectly fine card. But I've never, I never, and this is all 1 day of experience, right? Don't want to, generalize here. But I never felt like my opponents playing these cards or me playing these cards were really getting away with anything. So I think this is much more of a card quality deck, right? Where it's just like, yeah, like, I've got some good cards here, and, maybe I've got some of the small synergies. But I guess my hesitation just comes in a little bit where it's like, okay, well, if I'm ostensibly this, like, mid-rangey deck, which I think you are for the most part, maybe you can build a little more aggressive, a little more tempo-y if you're, like, closer to blue-white. Then, like, what am I doing that's better than a Maestros deck? Or what am I doing that's better than the Blitz deck? And I haven't found a good answer right just yet, right? I think it's very much in that middle space where you're not going too far above or under your opponent, and so I don't see a huge draw. Now, again, I don't want to undersell these cards because they're fine. I just haven't been super impressed. The sub-theme here, blue-white, counters/flyers, or counters matters flyers, maybe is a good way to put it. This is more appealing to me. To harken back to what I was saying before, I don't think, for the most part, like, Casualty is a bit of an exception. I think you can really have a Casualty deck and a Blitz deck. I think those are the 2 exceptions. But the rest of the mechanics we're talking about here, they're much more like the family mechanics. They're just more, yeah, you'll have some of these cards in your deck. You're not really a Connive deck. You're not really a shield counter deck. I think as we get into these ladder color pairs, you're more going to want to be about the 2-color pair adding some black cards or adding some green cards, right? When we talk about blue-white. So blue-white was the deck I was more impressed with yesterday, and this is just a more tempo-y flying deck. Celestial Regulator, 1 blue-white for a 2/3 flyer. When it ETBs, you tap a creature your opponents control, and if you have a counter on something, that thing doesn't untap, so it turns into like a Frost Lynx, right? Pretty good card. I wasn't blown away with it, but it was solid. Exotic Pets, this one's really good. Exotic Pets is 1 blue-white for an instant. Create 2 fish tokens that can't be blocked, and when these ETB, you can, if you have a counter on something, like a shield counter or a +1/+1 counter, they get your choosing of them. You can't have multiples, so if you have like 2 +1/+1 counters somewhere, you can't put a bunch of +1/+1 counters in the pets. It's only 1 of each. But having a 2/2 unblockable +1 with a shield counter was pretty good. I thought this card is good without any counters, and then great if you do get a counter. So as kind of like a blue-white tempo-y deck, I think there's a lot going on there. But I wouldn't lean too much into the theme. Just kind of your classic blue-white flyer deck, right? And then sometimes you've got these counter synergies. I will say that if you do have these counter synergies and you have cards that really want you to have counters, Backup Agent, which is 1 and a white for a 1/1 that comes in and puts a counter on something, +1/+1 counter, This is a card that my games felt very different having, like when I had it compared to when I didn't. Because when I had this on turn 2 and put it maybe on my just itself or on maybe a 1-drop I had, my Celestial Regulator came down on 3, locked something down. My Exotic Pets was decently better. Any of my cards up the curve were on already, right? They already were turned on to their full potential. When I didn't have this, I was just playing kind of bad-ish cards, right? My Celestial Regulator wasn't bad, but it was just a 2/3 flyer for the most part. And the thing I want to point out here, again, going back to the 2-drops mattering, or the 2-drops, there not being a lot of great ones, there aren't a lot of, in fact, there's like very few, this plus one other card, I think. Not a lot of cards in the set that put counters on cards turn 2 or before. So Backup Agent in particular, I think is going to be one that you're going to prioritize if you're in this space, because you're playing a quite different game if you have this on turn 2 compared to when you don't. Now, what do I think that says about the strength of this blue-white archetype, or anything in this blue-white adjacent space? If you really need to have this Backup Agent on turn 2, I don't know. Does it speak to the strength or the weakness of this archetype? Maybe a little bit. Overall, I don't think I was all that impressed with the archetype in general. But, if you do find yourself in the space, just, something to look out for. Okay, Cabaretti Alliance. Very loose as well, right? Kind of like, Alliance is, it just happens. It just, what can I say? It just happens. You play some creatures, you get your Witty Roastmaster trigger, you get your Sizzling Soloist trigger. There's not a lot to build around here. You put creatures in your deck, and they do their thing. Now, just like any mechanic, there's going to be good cards with this mechanic and kind of medium cards with this mechanic. I think that Witty Roastmaster, the 3/2 that deals damage, and Sizzling Soloist, the 3/2 for 4 that when a creature enters, a creature can't block, and if it's the second time the ability resolved, something else can't block but also has to attack. These are 2 of the better ones. I like these ones quite a bit. These were pretty good for me. Elegant Entourage, also 4 mana 4/4. When something enters, another target creature gets +1/+1 and trample. These were kind of nice. But I hadn't felt, just like I was talking about with the Obscura decks, I don't think the Cabaret decks felt greater than the sum of its parts. It was kind of just there, right? It was kind of just like, okay, my cards are doing their thing. And this makes sense to me as, in general, you don't want to add a 3rd color to your aggro decks that often. Like I was saying before, that just destabilizes your mana and makes things a little bit trickier. I don't think even though I was pointing out these good red cards, I don't think you're going to be splashing Witty Roastmaster in your green-white aggro decks, for example. So this is, a bit more of a puzzle to me. This is one that I think as the set goes on, I'll figure out and have some more thoughts coming back to this. But it wasn't apparent to me on day 1 that there was anything going on here that was better than just to play some creatures and attack. The 2-color pair, I want to point out here, Green-Red Treasure, also kind of dubious of this a little bit. So I think all of the treasure payoffs, Stimulus Package, Rock Security. So Stimulus Package is the enchantment, 4-mana enchantment that you make 2 treasures. You sacrifice a treasure and make a 1/1 creature or citizen token. Rock Security, 2 red-green for a 5/4. You can use treasure to pay for this card's mana cost. If you do, it only costs red-green. These cards, I think, I haven't been super impressed with. Stimulus Package was a card I was excited for. I didn't see it really go off. Again, 1-day experience. Maybe it's going to be better than it looked, but I was not scared of it from the opponent's side of the battlefield. Maybe they didn't have enough treasures to make it good, but it was just a little bit too low impact. Rock Security, kind of just a big dummy. Jetmir's Fixer is a good 2-drops. This is the red-green 2-drop 2/2. Pay red or green to pump it, gives +1/+1. Or if mana from a treasure was spent, you get a +1/+1 counter. Good 2-drop, but I think if you build a green-red deck, it's probably just going to be like green-red beats. I don't know. I think it's going to be a solid, aggressive deck. Probably not engine-y like the Blitz deck, but I could see it happening. Again, it's just these, the kind of creature fall or alliance and these treasure things. Like, there's not a ton of overlap here like there was with the casualty and Blitz kind of stuff in Maestros or in River Tears. So I'm less excited about the synergies here, is what I would say. Okay, and then our last family here, Brokers with shield counters. I have found the shield counter stuff to be, in one word, annoying. It hasn't been backbreaking. my opponent has a 3-mana 2/3 with a shield counter. It's annoying to get around with that. You can't just it does trade off for an early creature. It's almost like having 2 copies of the card. But I never felt like it was backbreaking on most of the commons and uncommons. I should specify, right? It's a good mechanic. It's definitely a boon to have these on your cards. But I don't feel like this is a whole deck or anything. Like it supports the blue-white flyers theme. It supports your green-white creature theme a little bit, just like protection on your creatures. That's the idea here. But it wasn't, it wasn't one of the standout cards, I would say, or one of the standout mechanics. I will say that changes as your card gets better. So on the commons, I was like, yeah, whatever. You got a 2/1 with a shield counter. That's pretty good. But when you move up to something like Disciplined Duelist, the green, white, blue 2/1 double strike with a shield counter, that felt like a pain. Or on a rare, like Rigo Streetwise Mentor, which is a 2/2 shield counter. Whenever a creature attacks with power 1 or less, you draw a card. Or Sanctuary Ward as giant 5/5 mythic busto card. I don't even need to really read it. It's really insane. It comes down with 2 shield counters. Like the better your card is, both in quality but also stats or difficulty to deal with. Like if it's a double striker, if it's a 5/5, the better the shield counter gets. Because one, you're protecting a better card. You don't care that much if your 2/1's protected, right? But also your opponent has to go through more to get off that first shield counter. They have to fight through the better creature twice. So as you move up in a rarity, value shield counters a little bit higher, or value what a shield counter does to a card a little bit higher, is what I would say. Green-white Citizen Tribal is the last 2-color pair here. Fits into the 2 last decks we were talking about. And I actually think I'm moderately excited for this deck. So it doesn't have the kind of engine-y stuff that the Blitz deck had, like I was talking about. But Civil Servant, 2-mana 2/3, green-white 2/3. It's a citizen, of course that matters. Whenever it attacks, you can untap or tap another untapped citizen you control. It gets +1/+1 lifelink. That's just a really good card, right? Really good 2-drop. Darling of the Masses, 4-mana, 2 green-white for a 2/4. Citizens you control get +1/+0. Whenever it attacks, you make a 1/1 green-white citizen token. That's a good card. I was impressed with this as just a 2-color deck. I was kind of into it. Just like a good green-white beatdown deck. I think the Citizen Tribal stuff is more present than either. Like, Citizen Tribal plays well with Alliance, so obviously you make a bunch of tokens, but there was nothing I felt was like, oh man, like they're making a bunch of tokens and that Alliance card is really going off, right? It was kind of just like incidental. So I think if I'm to place my money on a good, the second best 2-color pair, I think it would probably be green-white, if I'm to give an early guess. Just, I was impressed with what was going on there. Also worth noting that there are a lot of citizens in this set, just like a lot of random commons are citizens. So it's not like some tribal sets where it's like, okay, well, like, I have to really prioritize angels or, elves or whatever it is. It just happens. Your green and white cards are just citizens a lot of the time. So that's a little bit of a boon to this deck too. You don't have to you don't have to adjust your pick orders very much to make the citizen stuff work. Okay. Top comments. Here's our last part before we get into a Q&A. So just quickly, on these set overviews, I don't usually like to give my number 1, 2, 3 top comments, at least not strictly. I'll kind of just talk about comments I really like and talk about, maybe the standout number 1. There's a few standout number 1s, I think. But past that, I kind of just like to talk about cards I've been impressed with. So out of whites, I think the clear top comment is Inspiring Overseer. This is the 3-mana, 2-white, 2/1 flyer, ETBs, you gain a life, draw a card. What's not to love? This card's awesome. It's going to be a card you're going to first pick a lot of the time. You know the feeling when your opponent casts an Organ Hoarder in Midnight Hunt and you're like, oh, okay, this game's going to be like this. It was a little bit like that when my opponent cast Inspiring Overseer on turn 3. I was like, okay, because not only is it a good body, right? It's a good, evasive creature, but they get their card back. I mean, I don't have to explain why this card is good. It is just a very, very good card. So I got, some people were asking, is this going to be the, kind of the Organ Hoarder / Diagraph Horde test where you go, let's look at the rare. How good is the rare? Oh, but there is an Inspiring Overseer in this pack. And you go, all right, I guess I'm just supposed to take the Overseer. Is it going to be like that a lot of the time? Yeah, I think. Unfortunately, I think this card is that good. I don't know. I think you're gonna be sick of this card very quickly, unless you're the one casting it. Then you'll be very happy. Past that, Gathering Throng was one I was really impressed with. This is the 3-mana 3/1 Citizen that when at ETBs, you can go search for any number of Gathering Throngs in your deck. These are real. These were, like, not only did they get pumped by your Citizen payoffs, and, it's just like a bunch of Citizens you can get into your hand for your Citizen Matters cards. There's a lot of stuff that cares about going wide. This does, if you have a good Alliance trigger, you can trigger that multiple times. It was funny. I was playing against an opponent, and I was like, they played their first one, and they got 3 of them, right? And I was like, okay, that's going to be a lot to fight through. Surely they don't have any more. They emptied their hand, and then on the last one, they got 2 more from their deck. So I think with these kind of cards, you often don't want to play that many. Like, that's a lot. 6 is a lot, or 7 is a lot. But I think I'd be happy with 4. Like, the reason you don't want to go above that is because you don't want to have too many in your opening hand, right? Having 3 of these in your opening hand is kind of not so great. You don't want to, like, you want to draw the first one and not any of the other ones. But yeah, I think 4 is kind of the sweet spot. Past that, in white, Raffine's Informant, the 2-mana Connive creature I was talking about. Backup Agent, the 2-mana creature that puts a counter on something. Hold for Ransom, this is the pacifism. I was fine with this. I think it's an okay card. Like, I was nor impressed or felt like my opponent was casting anything embarrassing when they put this in my creature. Yes, they got punished some amount of the time when I was playing the casualty deck, but there was also times when I was just like, okay, well, I'm not playing a casualty deck, and they got rid of my 3-drop or my good 4-drop. There's not a ton of activated abilities in the set where it's just like, okay, you put that on their creature and they still get a lot of value. They can activate their ability because it doesn't shut down abilities, but it was fine. I just want to point this out as, you could put it in your deck and not be embarrassed. All right, moving on to blue. My top comment here is Expendable Lackey. So this is a 1-mana 1/1, exile from your grave. You make a 1/1 fish that can't be blocked. This card I found to be, like, really quite good in the casualty decks. Even in, like, a blue-white flyer deck, you kind of just play it early. Maybe you trade off with it. Maybe you just, like, chump and make the 1/1. The 1/1 token, those things are annoying. The unblockable tokens, like, you don't really want to cast a removal spell on it, but you kind of have to. It's a real clock. So this is, like, often on your 1-mana 1/1, you're looking for some sort of ability, right? You're looking for flying, or you're looking for just some sort of utility ability. The ability on this is you get to sacrifice it for a good card, right? So in my casualty decks, I think, I play 3 of these a lot of the time with enough casualty cards in my deck. Like, I was really, really impressed with this card when I played it. Other good cards, Rooftop Nuisance, 3-mana, casualty, tap target creature, it doesn't untap, you draw a card. This has been fine. It's a casualty. It's a sorcery casualty 1, I should say that. It was a good card in my casualty deck, was pretty impressed with it. Run out of town, 4-mana, instant. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on the top or the bottom of their library. I mentioned this before, but I liked it. And Majestic Metamorphosis. So this is kind of the suit-up variant. 3-mana, instant. Target creature becomes a 4/4 angel. Sorry, target creature or artifact. That's important. Becomes a 4/4 angel and gains flying. You draw a card. Really nice with all these, like, little dorky 1/1s, right? The more little dorky 1/1s you have, the better they are to upgrade. You lose that on the ninja, like, the ninja aspect of, oh, my opponent really needs to block me in this set. There's none of that. They don't really need to block your 1-mana 1/1 all that often. But, you do kind of have a few things that are like, okay, well, my opponent, I don't want to take damage from this, so, I don't want this hit trigger to go off, so I do want to block it. And then you cast the more Metamorphosis, and it's like, all right, well, my opponent got me there. So, not quite suit up, I don't think, but it does kind of feel like, and I've been fine with this card. Black's got a lot of cards I want to talk about, so I'll try to go through them relatively quickly. So my top 3, I don't know what order these are in, honestly, but they're all in the same tier currently. Corrupt Court Official, the 2-mana 1/1, make them discard a card. Girder Goons, the 5-mana 4/4, Blitz 4, makes a 2/2 when it dies, and Murder, 3-mana removal spell. I don't know what order I'm going to be taking these in. I don't know which one I'm going to take first. I imagine it's not going to be Murder, to be honest. I think it's going to be one of these creatures. Girder Goons. Like, Girder Goons plays closer to an Organ Hoarder level card than it might look, right? It's kind of similar. It's like 4 mana, you draw a card, but instead of getting selection in a forever 3/2 body, you get a 2/2 body and 4 damage from them right away, or they chump block. Like, I would put money on Court Official and Goons just being better than Murder. Murder's good. I don't want to talk it down too much. It is one of the better removal spells in the set, but these value generating creatures I think are quite a bit better. Then, of course, Fake Your Own Death. I've been talking it up all this entire episode. 2 mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+0. Then when it dies, it comes back. You make a treasure. Dig Up the Body. Kind of plays in a similar space. 3 mana instant. Casualty 1. Mill 2 cards. Return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. And then Deal Gone Bad. This is the 4 mana instant. -3/-3 to something. You target player mills 3. This has been fine. Like, it's in the conversation. It's not going to be, it's not really there as a card I think is a top common, but I just want to point it out as I was fine putting it in my deck. Let's move on to red. Red's also got a lot of awesome cards. So Strangle and Mayhem Patrol are my top 2 here. These are similar to Murder with those other creatures. I'm unsure which is better, Mayhem Patrol or Strangle. Mayhem Patrol, by the way, is the 2 mana 1/2 menace blitz creature. Again, I would not be surprised if it's just Mayhem Patrol over Strangle. Like, I think a lot of people looked at Strangle and were like, oh my gosh, busted 1 mana removal spell. I mean, it's good. Again, I have to be careful not to talk down these cheap interaction spells too much. But a 1-for-1 removal spell can only be so good, right? I was talking about how much stuff this Mayhem Patrol really does. And yeah, I honestly, if I'm to put some money on it, I think it would probably be Mayhem Patrol coming out as the top common as the set goes on. Past that, I really like Exhibition Magician, 3 mana 2/1. When it ETBs, you can either make a citizen token or a treasure token. Gold Hound, 1 mana 1/1 first strike menace. Sack it, make a mana. Just a nice little evasive creature that can ramp you out a little bit. Plasma Jockey, the 4 mana blitz creature. Target creature can't block when it attacks. And Sticky Fingers. So Sticky Fingers is a card that I haven't talked about just yet very much. This is a single red mana for an enchant creature. It has menace, and then when it deals combat damage, you make a treasure. When the enchanted creature dies, you draw a card. I haven't talked about it a lot because I am still unsure of how it plays. So Sticky Fingers in my red-black aggro deck was quite good in tandem with the 3/2 2-drop, the Ogre, the Custodian, 3/2 that comes in tapped. It's just nice to be able to put this in a high-power creature, get in, deal on a bunch of damage, get your mana back right away. Eventually, they probably have to block it, and you get a card back. So it's kind of nice. I am skeptical exactly how good it will be in these red decks because there's a lot of other good cards that just push damage naturally. Like, I don't know if you need to be putting this card in your deck to push damage. Like, the Mayhem Patrol, all the Blitz creatures, Plasma Jockey, they just do a really good job of pushing damage naturally. And there are times when Sticky Fingers can be awkward, right? So it's kind of up in the air right now. There's also, I don't want to gloss over the fact that Sticky Fingers has insane explosive potential, right? You go Gold Hound on 1, Sticky Fingers on 2. That's just so much, right? That's just like, well, I'm not blocking this Gold Hound forever. It's a menacing creature. I'm off, Sticky Fingers is menace too, I suppose. But it's like, okay, well, my opponent's gonna be a mana ahead each turn, and I'm not blocking this 1/1. And eventually, they can either sack it, right, with the Gold Hound ability to get their card back, or I have to block it so I'm not taking chip damage. So it's like, I don't know. There's definitely starts I can imagine where Sticky Fingers is great, right? Just like does it's just gonna run with the game. There's also gonna be times when it's like, okay, it's a little bit awkward. I put it in my creature, maybe they have to trade off and I get my card back, but it's not that impactful. So we'll see. I'm gonna keep my eye on this one. It is the card I'm actually the least sure of going into week 1 of the set. Our second slide here for red cards. There's that many red cards I like. There is a full second slide of red cards. These ones aren't quite as good, but I do want to point them out. Witty Roastmaster, 3 mana, 3/2 Alliance. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Witty Roastmaster deals 1 damage to each opponent. I've talked about this card a little bit before. I think this card is really good in multiples. Stands alone, fine on its own, just chip damage. Like, your aggressive red decks like this thing just sitting around. Your opponent's at 5, and again, I was talking about Blitz, where it's like you blitz something in, you draw into the creature, you blitz something in. This can really line up where you're just like, okay, well, that Witty Roastmaster dumped me 5 or 6 over the course of the game. And Wrecking Crew. So this is the 5 mana 4/5 reach trample creature. I don't think this is awesome, but it was annoying both for my opponent and for me. Like, it's large. It's very, very large in a format of very small creatures. 4/5 is not something that's easily dealt with through removal in this format. And also, like, you can't just block it, right? It's got trample. So, I don't know. I can only talk up a 5-drop so much, but just do want to point out this card looks kind of unassuming, but was pretty decent. Our last color here, green. Green gets the short end of the stick a little bit. Jewel Thief is awesome. 3 mana, 3/3, Vigilance, Trample. When it ETBs, you get a treasure token. I was talking about this card a little bit pre-set release, and I kind of like how this card is in the same tier as Inspiring Overseer, the 2-mana flyer that draws you a card, gains you a life. I don't think it's quite there. I think it is a tier below that card. It's a good card, but maybe this speaks more to how good Inspiring Overseer is rather than talking down Jewel Thief, because this is a great card. It's just not quite as good as the Overseer, I think. So this is like, more in the B minus range, where Overseer is like in the B plus A minus range, I would say. Still a great card, still my top green common. And then 2 other cards here. Warm Welcome, 3 mana, instant, look at the top 5 cards of your library, put a creature card from among them into your hand, and create a 1/1 citizen token. This card's been fine. I've been a little bit underwhelmed with it compared to how good I think it might play. 1/1 is still a little bit small for your 3 mana card. Like, this kind of is like a 3 mana ETB, look for a creature, if you want to think about that. And it triggers your alliance at instant speed, which I think is not amazing, honestly. I think there is some cards you care about that, where it's just like, okay, well, I give +1/+1 to my creature here because I trigger my alliance at instant speed. Most alliance triggers you don't actually care about if they're instants or not, so downplay that a little bit. Prize Fight, also a fine card. Card is played a little bit better than I might have expected to. 2 mana fight spell, instant, you make a treasure token. Obviously with these fight spells, kind of pick your spot. They're not just cheap, good removal, but it is one of the few instant removal spells in the set. So or one of the few instant common removal spells in the set. So I do have to give a little bit of credit there. Okay, and that's it. That's it for what I have to say. Chats, I'm going to send it over to you. Line up your questions. Of course, later, this is going to be on the Limited Level Ups podcast feed. Going to be on the Limited Level Ups YouTube. Check those all out. You can find the links there. And yeah, thank you so much for hanging out, listening, asking questions, and we'll get into what chat has to say. Do you think there's a good proactive deck to be found in all 5 allied color pairs? Good question. So green-white, yes. Black-red, yes. Black-green, I could see it, yes. And then we've got black-blue. That one a little bit less. I'm less excited about. I don't think the black cards are all that proactive. There's some of them for sure. Some of the blitz cards. And the blue cards are not that proactive either for the most part. They more want to play that grindy kind of casualty game. But I can see it. And then blue-white, yeah, for sure. I think blue-white is pretty proactive. So that might actually be a good way to frame it, of allied color pairs. If you're 2 colors, you're mostly proactive. And then if you add more colors, you become a little bit more slow down the game, value, grind, which of course makes sense. The more colors you add, the more you want to go towards the late game. And the more powerful cards you have, assuming you're picking up powerful gold multicolored cards, the more you want to go towards the late game too. So what's keeping us from drafting 4 to 5 color good stuff? Are the family synergies really worth it? Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this at the top of the podcast. What's keeping you from doing that is that I think that streamlined decks and a good curve and getting under people who are messing with their mana is a beneficial thing to do. Right? I think being able to have a solid, streamlined, proactive plan is going to win a lot of games. Now, not to say that the slower decks can't have ways to combat that. Certainly true. But I don't think you're always, especially given the card pool you're given or the draft you're given, you're not always just going to want to be biasing towards play all my colors, especially if there are multiple people at the table doing that because, they're just going to take the fixing. The other thing that pushes you a little bit towards 3 colors rather than 4 or 5 colors is just the fact that the fixing in the set pushes you towards playing within the families rather than playing cross like 4 or 5 colors. Like, you can definitely do it, but if you are in a draft pod where you don't have all the fixing in the world and you kind of maybe get 4 or 5 dual lands, nothing, and then nothing else past that, the dual lands, the fetch lands that go and get a color for each, one color of the family, or the allied colored lands, those do incentivize you to be more within a certain arc, right, in a 3-color pair, rather than branch out more, because you don't have enemy color pairs. Like, for example, if you have a deck that's like red, like everything but white, you only have 2 allied dual lands to be able to bridge, fix your mana. You don't have the enemy dual lands in there, right? You don't have like the blue-red dual land that you might want to make your mana work a little bit better. And then also, yes, hypothetically, you can pick up the right fetch lands, the ones that go and get a land of a certain color, but that's not always going to be a given that you get the perfect ones, right? Those do fix for enemy colors, but only a certain, like, every single one only fixes for one pair of enemy colors, where all of them fix for 2 allied color pairs, right? So that pushes you more towards fewer colors than more. So two things there for sure. 2 things you have to consider. Just like streamlined decks have a place in the format, and also the fixing isn't quite there for 5 colors, or isn't quite as supported as it would be in some other multicolor sets. It seems like Obscura / Alliance, I guess that's Cabaretti, are on the weaker end of the spectrum. At this point, would you avoid any allied colors or just draft what's open? Yeah, especially on week 1, I don't think I'm like gonna avoid anything. I mean, like I was saying before, if I really wanted to like win all my drafts on week 1, I would probably be forcing black-red until I couldn't. Honestly, I don't think that's like the optimal strategy by any means. That's just what, from my experiences, what has worked, and because it's worked before, I'll probably keep trying to do it more. But I'm definitely not willing to write anything off. Like, everything I've said here today, this has just been my one-day experience, and, also, encompassing other people's opinions I've heard too. I don't think it's smart to try to, make sweeping assumptions or, give certain characteristics to decks based on that. But, I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is true, that, like, the Obscura family or, like, Alliance, Cabaretti are some of the weaker things to be doing. That you just overall, I think you should wait at least until, 17 lands is going to show us the way for sure. Right after a few days, we're going to be like, okay, well, let's point towards more this direction or a different direction. I don't think there is any color pair. Like, if I started up a draft right now, if I could, there's no card I would open if it was a powerful card that would make me go, oh, I like that card, but I don't like that color pair, so I don't want to take it. Like, I'm just going to be taking the best cards early on, or what I think are the best cards, especially because exploration early on is really important. If you're pigeonholing yourself into one thing early on, even though you think it's a good thing, it can kind of have some ripple effects going later in the format. You can kind of have some trouble getting into, adjusting once you figure out, okay, well, how, these synergies work these ways, these synergies work these ways. I think it's just, at least how I operate, I wouldn't try to do that in the early weeks of the format, or the early week, I should say, early days, maybe after a few weeks. How would you describe the rares in this format? We've been having sets with busted rares, and I would like to hear your takes. So I think we are closer to Kamigawa than we are to Crimson Vow, for sure. I think the rares in Kamigawa were good, but mostly not busted. I mean, there was a few standouts for sure. Wanderer, Kijiki Saga, Jugen Saga. But that's going to be true of any set. I haven't felt the rares so far have been totally backbreaking. They've been good, especially some of the multicolor ones. Like, it's all relative to how good the commons are, right? The commons in Kamigawa were quite good, so you didn't feel the impact of the rares all that much. Same with the uncommons, right? The uncommons are really, really good. We had some, like, A-level uncommons in that set. I think maybe you'll feel it a little bit more in this set, because I don't think the commons and the uncommons are as standalone good compared to the rares. So rares might define a few more games than they did in the last set, but I don't feel like overwhelmingly so. Do you think the 1-drops are lower picks, since it's hard to know what color you're going to have untapped on turn 1? So I think the 1-drops in this set are worse than they have been for the past little while, just across the board. Like, there were a few I mentioned today that were good, right? Like Goldhound I like Expendable Lackey. I think that if you have aggressive 1-drops, again, you're going to be more pointed towards 2 colors anyway, so that's not as much of a concern. Like, you're just going to play your Goldhound in your, like, red-green or red-black deck. And then if you're, like, your casualty decks play your one mana 1/1s, you don't care as much that you play those on 1, right? Like, I don't care so much that I play my Expendable Lackey on 1. I just care that I play it and sacrifice it at some point. So, yeah, it matters. It's definitely something to consider in your deck build, but I don't think it's going to have a wide effect on the format. I don't think you should be thinking about it too much. I guess maybe a better way to put it, or a broader lesson here, is just that, like, your slower decks don't care as much about 1-drops unless they're good utility cards. Like, your slower decks want utility, cheap creatures. Like, they would still, they still benefit from cheap creatures, but you want those cheap creatures to be part of a bigger plan, be a good draw on turn 6 or 7, like Expendable Lackey is. You don't really want them to just be like, Like a good comparison is I saw a lot of people putting the like Moth Rider Patrol, the 1-mana 1/1 flyer, in their Kamigawa like slower blue-white decks a lot of the time. And I don't think you really want to be doing that, because a lot of the value of that card is attacking early. You really want in your slower decks that are going to turn 7, 8, 9, your cards to have high-ish impact for as long as possible. But in your more aggressive decks, you kind of just want them to attack, right? You don't care as much about a utility card. You just want it to be a good evasive creature. What is the order for the best fixing? Fetches, duels, and then 5, 6 color mana dudes. And are you playing 18 lands? So early on in the draft, I think that the fetch lands are the best ones to take because they're flexible. They can go get 3 colors, right? Once you know your base is, let's say, blue-white, you want the taps for one of the 2 sacrifices to draw land more than the fetch land, because you care about the draw card aspect is better than the flexibility. That might change if you're not exactly base blue-white. Like, let's say you are blue-white-black, your base black-blue, and you have some white cards. You might appreciate the flexibility of the fetch land, and if you have that pick between the family fetch land and the allied dual land, you take the fetch land still. But if you are closer to base 2 colors, and you know those 2 base colors, you appreciate the ability to sack your land more than the ability to get one of the 3, the option of one of the 3. And so those are the best 2. The rare lands are obviously the best ones, and then the fixers, the creature fixers are probably the worst. Just they're a little bit clunkier. Are you playing 18 lands? Is a good question. So this is a question that comes up a lot, and I don't. The way I often answer it is you generally shouldn't think of formats as 18 land formats or 17 land formats or 16 land formats. Think of your deck as a 16 land deck or a 15 land deck or whatever land deck. Like, if you're playing a bunch of colors and you need all the sources, you're going to be pushed towards more lands. In my red-black deck I've been talking about all episode, I played 16 lands, right? If you are somewhere in the middle, you play normal 17. There's going to be some formats, like, this format might, on average, you play 17 or 18 or whatever, but I don't think it's helpful as a general rule, right? You should really ask what your deck is doing. How many colors is it playing? How many mana sources does it need? What's the curve look like? How many mana sinks do you have, right? That kind of stuff. Really ask yourself those kind of questions. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. We're going to pack up here, and we'll see you next week. Next week we're going to do our State of the Format address, a little bit more game time in, a little bit more structured, a little bit more, deep dive on this set once we have some better data, both in the playing data, actually playing with the cards, and using 17 lands to kind of inform some thoughts. So, goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.